Hello and welcome to another video here on DAX Wednesdays. In this video, we're going to have a look at a DAX function called Use Relationship. This DAX function belongs to the relationship family of DAX functions. Let's switch to Power BI for the demo. So in this Power BI report, we are using a data model in which we have two tables. First of all, sales, which has four columns in it. First being the product, second sales amount, the third and fourth are the invoice date and payment date. You need to know the difference between the date on which you send an invoice and the date on which you receive the payment. The second table that we have is just has one column as shown over here. Now we'll switch to the model view where we can have a look at these two tables. As you can see right now, they don't have any relationship between them. One thing that we need to note is in the sales table, we have two columns which have dates in them. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to create two relationships between the date column in the date table and the two date columns which we have in the sales table. How we can do that? We can select the date column in the date table like this, place it on, first of all, invoice date. Now Power BI will prompt you with this window where you need to check what kind of cardinality we have, what is the cross filter direction, and you will see at the bottom, since this is the first relationship that we are making between these two tables, it's already checked this box where we make this relationship active. I will click on save. So see, this is the first relationship that has been created between date and invoice date. Now I will click on the date column in the date table one more time and drag it to place it on the payment date. This time Power BI has prompted us with another window, but you'll see this time it hasn't checked this box. Why is that? Let's say, for instance, I click on this. You will see Power BI will not let me save this relationship because we can only have one active relationship between two tables in a data model. Since we already created one active relationship, this is going to be an inactive relationship which is represented by the dotted line like this. So the active relationship is represented by a solid line, whereas the inactive relationship is represented by the dotted line. Let's move to report view now, where we'll create a table visual using the values that we have in our data model. In this table visual, we are going to select the date column from the date table like this and the sales amount as the second column. Now the values that you see over here, Power BI has by default used the active relationship that we created in the model view. In order to show you that it has done so, we will create a measure by clicking on the three dots over here in our date table, new measure. We'll call it total invoice is equal to sum of the sales amount and close the bracket. We'll add this measure now to our table. We'll see it has represented us the same values in the same rows. The second column over here, which had already used by default the active relationship, is working fine and it has returned the values that it should ideally if we were to use a measure of this sort. Now this was for the active relationship. Now we're going to have a look at the inactive relationship wherein we get to use the use relationship DAX function. That's why we are here for. I'm going to click on the three dots over here one more time and say new measure. This time around I will say total payment. If you remember, we had an inactive relationship between the date column in the date table and the payment date in the sales table. We want to use that relationship now in order to get this total of payment, which will return us the values based on the payment date. This time around, we're going to use a DAX function called calculate. I have made a separate video on calculate. You can have a look at it by clicking on the link at the top right over here. Calculate will take in the first argument of expression. You're going to put sum of sales amount one more time. And for the second argument, we are going to use now the use relationship DAX function. So the use relationship DAX function takes in two arguments where we need to be precise over here. It uses an existing inactive relationship by naming the two columns that were used to define this relationship. So we're going to use the date column in date for the first argument, and we're going to use the payment date column as the second argument from the sales table. I'll close this bracket and say OK. Now you see, since Power BI has returned us no errors, this means or this measure is working perfectly fine. Now I will add this measure in our table visual. You will see it has now returned us the values based upon the payment date. The total of all these three columns are obviously going to be the same, but the date on which the invoice was made and the date on which the payment we received are obviously going to be different. We were able to find out the total of payment based upon the dates on which we received the payments by using the use relationship DAX function. In order to understand the difference between what is active relationship and what are inactive relationships, how they are represented by, and in which case we will be using the use relationship DAX function, I have made this slide for you. If you require, you can pause this video. Now in our demonstration, we saw that in order to use an inactive relationship, the use relationship DAX function needs to be explicitly used for this kind of relationships in measures. Inversely, the use relationship DAX function requires an inactive relationship. For instance, if we were to go back to a Power BI data model and let's say I delete this inactive relationship between the date column and the payment date, let's say yes. And if I were to go back to our report view, you will see our measure of total payment has returned as an error because there is no relationship that it can use because we have deleted the inactive relationship that we had defined previously. So that's all for this video. I hope you understood when to use the DAX function use relationship. Let me know in the comments below of what you thought about this video. Do not forget to like and subscribe. I will see you in the next video.